PolyTheism is a podcast at the intersection of sexuality, identity, relationships, and spirituality. If you're seeking a deeper spiritual connection in these areas of your life, we're hoping to be companions on your journey.
Whether you've been hurt by religion and are looking for healing, identify with a faith tradition and are looking outside of the box, identify as spiritual but not religious and want more, or are looking for meaning beyond what is in your life, we believe we can do this together.
Through love, curiosity, and wonder. Hi, Sandra.
Hi, Justin. How are you?
I am feeling pretty good. Over the last few weeks, there have been some new connections that I've made. Some with people that I have known for a little while. Some are new. Some I haven't seen in a couple months just because life can get crazy. And yeah, all of these have created all sorts of wonderful tingly feelings inside. And that's a great feeling and a good counterbalance to all the bullshit that is going around in the rest of the world.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Joy is a rebellion, I think.
Yes. Joy is an act of rebellion. So, Sandra, how are you doing?
I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, over the last few weeks, you have been making all sorts of fun new connections, and you've been sharing the things that are comfortable with everyone involved to share with me, and I am just excited as can be for you. And we were talking about that last night. I was just in absolute joy because you were just so happy with the afternoon that you had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really delicious.
Yeah. And you telling me about it made me feel all delicious and just be excited for you. And that brought up the topic that we wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, today we are going to be discussing compersion.
What? We're going to be discussing what?
Yes, compersion. See, not Compersion, Compersion.
Compersion.
Yeah.
For those who have not seen it.
Yeah, and as I understand it, within the polyamory community and maybe even in the community at large, compersion is understood as the experience of feeling joy at another person's experience.
As a matter of fact, the definition in Wiktionary is vicarious joy associated with seeing one's partner have a joyful, romantic, or sexual relationship with another.
Oh.
Yeah. And just to give a little background on the term compersion, if you haven't heard about them, there's this group called the Karista community. It's got its own set of, potential issues and that sort of thing. Karista, Kerista, if you want to look them up. They came out of the hippie movement and started their own commune, which then became, very kind of cult-like and all of that. But they actually came up with this term during a Ouija board session, and they asked for this: can we have a word that describes the emotion that is the antonym of jealousy? And that is
the antonym.
Correct. The antonym of jealousy, the opposite of jealousy. And that is what the term was originally designed to be. And it's been picked up by the polyamory community and by the ethical non-monogamy community in, a greater sense, to mean, just feeling that kind of happiness and joy in seeing your partner also find happiness and joy that may not necessarily include you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
so it came out of a Ouija board session.
Well, like an alphabet board session. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So this is like a 60s, like free love, hippie kind of stuff, and hopefully not the Kool-Aid drinking.
Oh my God, I can't. Oh my God, no,
movement.
no, not like that. I mean, they definitely had they had pods, and you could only sleep with people in the pod, and you were supposed to sleep with them on a schedule, and polyfidelity was practiced. You couldn't have people enter into it, so it's got its own set of problems. But then again, This community was founded in the 60s, and the word compersion comes from 1980. So we've had 45 years of growth since then. And the term has grown just like a lot of other terms that we know, like queer, like bisexual, like...
Gosh, I mean, pan-romantic, pansexual, right? It seems to me that especially the queer community, or any community that is necessarily kind of on the edge of the margins of what is normative, often creates its own vocabulary and creates new words or assumes old words, and kind of repurposes them for empowerment. Just like, how, like you mentioned the word queer, that was, kind of a pejorative back in the 80s and 90s, when I was growing up. But now people use it as a term of empowerment. I use it as a term of empowerment.
That is something that I consider myself a part of the queer community. And that is something that gives me a sense of community. It gives me a sense of belonging. And I think that that's a really important aspect of this whole, why do we need a name for this? I get that a lot when people are talking about pronouns, when people are talking about terminology, and it's not something that they're familiar with and they don't necessarily want to make the change or really adapt to it. They're like, well, why is this such a big deal? It's just a word. But it's not, right? Having frameworks for how we understand who we are and what we are experiencing is incredibly important. And as a matter of fact, I think that's kind of at the heart of some of the spirituality stuff we have been talking about, and some of the bigger terms that you have used on this podcast.
like things like existential and ontological, like those kinds of things. Yeah. Well, the word compersion, we're looking at kind of these Latin kind of structures here, com being with or together or to experience at the same time. And then the later word, the Persian piece, is a Latin verb partior, I believe, and it means to divide or to share. And by dividing, not necessarily dividing to separate, but dividing kind of loaves and fishes kind of dividing, right? When you have an abundance and you break it up and share with others, then there creates more abundance. And so, the French word, what is it? Comperge. Those of you who
just
speak
forgive
French,
us. Just forgive us.
Please correct me. Was used to describe how the Tupi people of the Brazilian Amazon, how brothers-in-law would sometimes share wives with each other. And so Levi Strauss's book about these people talks about this French word as a way of kind of describing the experience of indigenous peoples and their practice of sharing.
So let's talk a little bit about what compersion is in terms of our communities. So I am part of a queer community. I'm part of the polyamorous community. I'm part of the nerdy community. I'm part of the neurodivergent community. The kinky community.
The kinky community.
Sex positive community. And all of those, and for me, I would define compersion as the joy that I feel in knowing that my partner is being fulfilled, right? Whether for me, and again, this is just for me. Please understand, not everybody feels compersion, right? First and foremost, not everybody ever gets that feeling. And even if they do, they don't necessarily feel it in the same way that I do or for the same reasons. So like for me, I get compersion, luckily, even if my partner is getting what some people might say is something that they could get from me, right? So like having sex with another woman, that's, or me having sex with another man, right? So like if you go out, you have sex with another woman, some people think, well, you could get that at home. We know that that's different. We know that no matter what is going on, the experience that you're having with a different person is just a very different energy. It's a very different experience, and there is no replacing it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no, we have that at home.
Yeah, and that's a really good distinction. And it's something that I've tried to communicate with people who are monogamous and really struggle with this idea of like, don't you get intensely jealous if a lover or a partner is experience something with somebody else, and it could be sex, it could be going out on a trip, it could be seeing a concert, whatever it is. And there is this almost cultural normative belief that if a lover or a connection or a partner or a spouse is going out and doing this with somebody else, that there necessarily needs to be some kind of jealousy. There has to be some kind of pain and agony. And like what you just said, I don't believe that's true. I don't believe that's true for some people, maybe
Mm-hmm.
others. But when I look back at myself and, when I was growing up and as a teenager and into my young adulthood and now midlife, I realized that like in my 20s, something
Mm-hmm.
shifted and I stopped feeling jealous. I don't know how else to describe it, but in my 20s, I had started, it was Vegas, I was at a good job, things were kind of free and flowing. That's when I had started having kind of my first sexual and relationship experiences outside of kind of
Mm-hmm.
monogamy in that way. And because of those experiences, all of a sudden, I just stopped feeling jealous because in my mind, it seemed as if I didn't need to
Yeah.
anymore. And I started to experience joy and pleasure and excitement for people in my life who I may be connected with in a few different ways, but were connecting with other people. And I guess I figured also for myself, it's like if they don't want to be with me, they don't have to
Mm-hmm.
be,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when they are with me, they're choosing me. And the same, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. And them choosing someone else for a little while does not undermine them choosing
Mm-hmm.
you. I
Yeah.
want to point out a couple of things that you said in there that I think are really important as we think about compersion. Again, I just want to stress because for it, a lot of people feel pressured to feel compersion. You might not. You may never feel
Mm-hmm.
it, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with you. You're not less poly. You're not less whatever just because you don't have that feeling. Right? So please
Yeah.
do keep that in mind. But one of the things that you said in there that I think is really important is that you began to feel this, right? So
Yeah.
finding your way to compersion was a process. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
like all of a sudden you just felt it or you just naturally felt it all the time. It was a process of undoing. And I
Yeah.
think that is super
And
important.
and I love
Yeah, go
that.
ahead.
Yeah, I love that idea of a process of undoing because I believe that for a lot of us, and I'll speak for myself, my journey into ethical non monogamy and polyamory involved a lot of
Mm-hmm.
deconstruction. And I would say that that deconstruction is very similar to the religious deconstruction that I experienced with my religion and spirituality moving from Catholicism into Unitarian
Mm-hmm.
Universalism. Is that I needed to face all the normative structures and beliefs that I previously held, realizing that I no longer believed them. And yet the neural pathways had already been set.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking 30 years of reinforced conditioning and suddenly needing to create new neural
Yeah, and I
pathways.
think
And that,
it's important to note that that is those feelings that you had, those the undoing that you had to do there, the things that you're undoing gave you comfort and peace and a
mm-hmm,
sense of belonging. So it's not like these things are easy to let go of. They are not.
Oh, gosh,
This is
no.
a fraught process. So if you're somebody that is, trying open relationships or trying ethical non-monogamy or trying, even kink with other partners, and you find that you're not necessarily feeling that, understand that that is a process. It can take time. And it requires this deconstruction that you're talking about. And honestly, if you have to do that deconstruction all by yourself because your partner won't do it with you, yeah,
That's hard. That's really
and it
hard.
sometimes becomes very difficult to be in relationship with somebody who won't do that work.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah. And I believe that deconstruction process, moving out of heteronormativity and mononormativity into the compersion experience, I believe that actually is similar to a spiritual practice. And the reason I say that is that one reason why we call them practices is because these are things that continuously happen over a person's life. It's not one of those one and done, like I graduated poly level 201 and suddenly I'm compersion. No, it is literally a process that keeps on happening every single day, every single moment, and it gets easier over time. And there will still be moments when those old feelings can come up. There will still be these moments where all of a sudden I'm in a new situation and there's grief, there's sadness, there's loss, and I need to move through those feelings once again, right? Again, practicing my new beliefs, practicing my new experiences within polyamory.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying about that is super important, that this is a process that doesn't end. As you know, Nick and I started opening up our relationship, because those are the only terms that we knew at the time, back in 2000, I think. So it's been a while, and our first conversations about it were emotionally fraught. Because both of us had at least sexual interest in the same sex, if not more than that. We knew that we needed space to explore it, but there was fear associated with that. What if they don't choose me again? What if they find someone better, which is actually an ego situation on my part, not on their part, right? And what if this doesn't work and I feel really bad, and all of that. And that communication process was super important. And I remember the first time that he went out and found someone and had sex with them and came back and talked to me about it. I felt joy for him, but I also cried. I cried because something had changed irrevocably, right? There was no going back at that point, and I knew it. And that was letting go of a place in society that I knew I was never going to hold anymore. And that's hard. And we had this conversation recently when you were talking about a new connection that you had made. I was telling you, I want you to understand that I'm very happy for you. And also I might cry, right? Because this is a new step. This is something that's different. And it's big emotions for me. But those big emotions, even if I do cry, even if there is grief, the joy is also there.
Right. No, and I love that, because one thing that I've learned about human spirituality is that we are creatures that are able to experience more than one emotion at the same time. I can experience joy and grief at the same time.
As a matter of fact,
or a wide range, right?
As a matter of fact, some of the most profound experiences I've had in my life were a combination of grief and joy. Those are important moments. And I think there's a back up a little bit, since we're talking about terminology. I think it's really important to note that there is a difference between happiness and joy.
No, tell me more about that.
Happiness is like a sensation that you have. Like right now, things are going well. I feel good. There's a smile on my face. I'm kind of dancing a little bit. All of this. I feel loved and wanted. all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Joy is a deep appreciation for a moment, even if that moment is hard, right? So, and I might
Yeah.
feel teary just saying, like, when my first husband died, we took him to California to scatter his ashes. And when I let his ashes go in the ocean, it was one of the hardest moments of my life. But there was also joy because this man that I loved so deeply was not in pain, was not suffering, and was released. And I've never forgotten that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Bittersweet joy.
Yeah.
Right. Oh. Often people believe that joy and sadness exist on kind of opposite ends of the emotive spectrum. What I'm hearing from you, and thank you for being so vulnerable to share that pain, but I get the sense that it's not necessarily that they're opposite ends of a spectrum, but
Mm-mm.
that they can intersect.
And often do.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know, like, I'm sure I'm not the only person on the planet that has had this experience where you move from playfully having sex with somebody to, you know, what a lot of people call making love, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where it becomes that soft, even if it's like not soft at all,
Mm-hmm.
but you get these soft, connected, really vulnerable feelings
Yeah.
in those moments. Like in those moments, I have tended to cry when that happens, you know? And I think we've both seen that in relationship with each other. And, you know, that is not a unhappiness. That is
No.
not, there is an interesting kind of side note, like a slight aftertaste of sadness on that. Because again, a line has been crossed and it can't be uncrossed.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that means I am now vulnerable with this person.
Mm-hmm.
I have let this person in more deeply.
Mm-hmm.
And now this person has an impact on me.
Mm-hmm.
And there is some grief in that because you're not as protected as you were.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And some fear.
Yeah. And some tremendous joy.
Yeah.
Because being seen is absolutely, I think, the most joyous thing that a person can feel.
Mm-hmm.
I am being seen right now and understood and held in all of my parts.
Yeah. A sense of belonging.
Yeah. And going back to what we were talking about, compersion, honestly, I experience compersion very much like that.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like a sense of belonging. We talked about this. You had an experience a while back, and you immediately called me afterwards. Like, as you were going, you wanted to share it with me. You're excited to share it with me, right? That was a sexual experience with somebody else. But number one, it was okay for us to share it. We both knew that it was okay, and you knew from the other partner that it was okay to share it.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, the very first thing that you thought after that was, I want to tell Sandra.
Well,
you know? And
yeah. No, and
that's awesome.
yeah, and that drive for like after an amazing experience, right? It could be a concert, it could be a roller coaster, it could be, you know, whatever it is. It could be having a new, you know, intimate sexual experience with somebody for the first time. That drive that I experienced to suddenly want to share that, it's not out of a sense of bragging or a sense of pride or a sense of like, hey, guess what I just did. It was bubbling up from the sense of, I just had an amazing experience and I need another human being who I love to understand that with me. Right? It was like almost like me seeking a validation of meaning. It's like, I can't believe that I just had this experience. I need to check in with somebody else to make sure it happened.
Was this real?
Yeah.
And going back to what we were talking about before, that sense of vulnerability that you get when you get to a place that you know that you love someone, right? When you've passed the, I really think you're awesome, to, oh shit, I love you.
Yeah.
And I use that, oh shit, specifically because it is a scary experience.
Yeah. We'll have to do another episode on love.
On oh shit, I love you.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a good one. But when you cross that line into that, you have entered into a space of vulnerability with that person to a point that some big experiences in your life don't feel real unless they're shared with that person.
Yeah.
And I think it's not going to be every experience, but there are going to be some of those experiences.
Yeah.
And I am lucky enough to experience compersion, and you knew that ahead of time. But then we also had this conversation. I think it's important to note that compersion is not something that just comes automatically.
Oh, yeah.
Because somebody is having a different experience. If you had come in and said, oh, I just had the experience with this amazing redhead with better hair than you and the most perfect boobs. I wish you had those boobs or whatever.
Right.
Then I'm not going to experience compersion.
No, because it's comparison.
That's right. You can't have both of those in the same place.
Yeah.
And this can come from either direction. It could be coming from your other partner making those comparisons, or it could come from you making those comparisons to this other person.
Yeah. What is the quote? Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The older I get, the more I feel that, like, to my bones, to the bones of my bones, to the soul of the bones of my bones.
Yeah. Now, that's a really good distinction, right? Because that is one way that kind of a bragging can happen, where all of a sudden it is a comparison between two people or two experiences. Like, oh, man, this person fucks a lot better than you do. Right? That is so gross.
Wow.
And that is because all of a sudden it's taking away the inherent worth and dignity of the other person. And that is definitely not compersion. There's this Buddhist concept called mudita, which is kind of translated as sympathetic joy, right? And sympathetic, so means having sympathy, and often sympathy can be thought of as kind of like, oh, don't patronize me, but sympathy is an experience of wanting to share in somebody else's experience. And so sympathetic joy is that bubbling up of, I am so joyous with you because I know what it is like to experience joy. And you just shared an experience that touches on the similarity of my experience. And now we're both celebrating it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But to take that joy and suddenly make it into a comparison or a judgment on another person, that isn't joy. That's I don't know. What do you think that is?
I can't say this in a short way, but I was just thinking about this as you were talking. If sex is a notch on the bedpost for your partner, like I got one more, I got one more, I got one more. If sex is about collecting or owning or proving, then it's really hard to have compersion for that, because that is not an interaction with another person. That is an interaction for yourself and your conquest. Right?
So all of a sudden the person is an object. Yeah.
Yeah. And if that was the case, again, being a consensual object is totally fine if that's what you want. And I
negotiate beforehand.
I wholly support that. I have had fun with consensual objects in the past and will continue to have fun with that. But if that is just how you approach relationships, it's going to be hard for your partners to have compersion.
Yeah.
because they're just going to feel like one in a set that you're collecting.
Yeah. Exactly.
And if that is the way that it's done, like, oh, this one has a better binder. I'm thinking about books because I collect books.
Mm-hmm.
This one has a better binder. This one has like the best opening line, so forth and so on. If you're doing those kind of comparisons, and trying to kind of collect a set, you're never going to find compersion in your partners. I don't think.
Yeah.
Your partners will feel compared. They will feel collected, and they won't feel appreciated as full human beings.
Yeah.
So the reason that I feel compersion is because I have had partners that not only recognize and revere my humanity,
Mm-hmm.
but they recognize and revere the humanity in the others that they interact with, even if
Right.
it's a one-off thing, like
Yeah.
even if it's a one-night stand, they're still like, this was an awesome person,
Mm-hmm.
right? You don't just tell me about what happened in the bedroom. You tell me about that person.
Yeah.
And I do the same. We've had these in the past. I don't have another partner right now, but like when I have had other partners, we've had those conversations, and I can see it in your face and I can hear it in your voice that you feel it too.
Yeah.
What's your experience of compersion?
Yeah, it's very similar to that. It really is. For me, it is that sense of joy and even relishing that amazing experience, because I know what that feels like, right? I know what it feels like to suddenly like connect with somebody and have all of those wonderful hormones and neurochemicals making all the spicy tinglies all throughout the body, and to know what it is like to suddenly connect in a new way. And those memories, those experiences become alive again, right? When I hear, like, we have a mutual comet who lives in Texas, and when you're with them, I bubble, I laugh. When all three of us share a little chat together, and I mean, I celebrate when you're together because I know how happy you make each other. And to me, that's the experience of compersion, right? When somebody that I'm connected with suddenly has an experience for the first time, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, whether they all of a sudden, they go to a new music artist that they've never been to before with another partner, or if they experience, a sexual or sensual or emotional experience with another person for the first time. I don't care that it's not me. I celebrate that they've done it, that they've had it. And then it's like, oh my gosh, tell me all about it. I don't know, like I geek out about that kind of thing, but that's how I experience compersion.
Yeah, compersion, like, I think something that's really important in all of this is to recognize that this, again, going back to that concept of a process, this is something that we have to work our way into. Relationships and sex has, like, for centuries, white, heteronormative colonial culture has shown us has told us that only one type of sex with one person is acceptable, and everything else is somehow deviant.
Yeah, and that's
right?
been backed up by religious institutions too.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Imposing their sexual, moral, ethical agenda onto peoples and cultures for whom that was not normative, but suddenly it was pejorative.
Yeah. Yeah. Barbaric, deviant,
Yeah.
Backwards, and all of these other kind of things.
Evil.
Finding a way. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really important too. Finding a way back to reclaiming that sense of joy in sexual desire and in, relationship desire is very important. I mean, our culture especially really frowns upon any kind of intimate interaction between people who are not in a married relationship,
Mm-hmm.
you know? That's like, and even that the married
Yeah.
hetero relationship.
Or on the relationship escalator.
Yeah, or moving toward it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so, like, I mean, there's a big thing out right now about the fact that, like, Pedro Pascal got a kiss. Have you seen that?
I
Oh, God, I
did.
can't think of the guy who kissed him, but he was in the movie with him. But, like, yeah, two guys kissed. Two European dudes kissed. Guess what? European dudes do that.
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't mean that they're having sex, and it doesn't mean that they are, you know, in any of those kinds of ways. In a lot of other cultures, that kind of intimacy, that touching, that talking in a vulnerable way, that interacting with each other, sleeping in the same bed, you know, holding hands when you're walking down the street, all of that intimacy is not considered, you know, it hasn't been colonized in the same way in a lot of other places. And kind of separated. Remember, colonization thrives on separation.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when you make one thing the ideal and everything else somehow demeaning, you're lessening a human experience.
Yeah.
And getting back to a place where you can reclaim that human experience is not, it's a work of a lifetime.
Yeah, very much
It's the work
so.
of a lifetime.
And as you've mentioned before in this conversation, I mean, it's okay for that some people don't experience compersion in this way. Maybe they experience compersion, you know, for some things, but not for others, right? Like my nesting partner definitely can feel compersion around when, you know, something amazing happens at work or in the hospital, or when I'm out with our child and something amazing happens, and is that joy, right? Or something our child experiences for the first time, and both of us are experiencing compersion for them at the same time, right?
Yeah.
However, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to sex and sexuality, you know, my nesting partner is monogamous, right? My nesting partner has that experience where it is sometimes very emotionally hard to be in a marriage and a relationship with somebody who's polyamorous. And I don't begrudge them the lack of compersion in that way, because thankfully through that deep work, that deep practice, that we keep talking about, the shame and the anger and everything else has kind of just moved into different emotional experience, right? Sometimes it's bittersweetness. Sometimes, it may include, some jealousy or some envy. But at the same time, it is not directed in a way that is harmful. It's just acknowledging that the emotions exist.
Right. I mean, there is no stop doing that because it makes me feel bad. Right? Your nesting partner has never been like that.
Yeah.
Stop doing that because it makes me feel bad is never going to work. Right?
Yeah.
Like, nobody likes that, but as a matter of fact, I actually think like that there have been moments when there was something similar to compersion. Remember when we went to the Sisters of Mercy concert? Sisters of Mercy is not a band that she's super familiar with or that she really likes, but she knows I love it. I love that band. Probably one of my favorite bands of all time. And you came to it with me. And, there was joy. In that. Like, oh, he gets to go to this thing that is like more goth industrial than I really want. And, with
and
somebody who is. Yeah.
and I love that.
Yeah. It's not like it's, we're not just talking about sexual experiences. When we're talking about sex and romantic experiences, those are the most fraught in our culture. The ones that are hardest for us to get to the depths of and to unearth and to deconstruct.
Yeah. And again, a lot of that is, I believe a lot of that is cultural, right? I believe a lot of our beliefs, my beliefs, our cultural beliefs around sex and sexuality and intimacy are all kind of made up, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we look at the larger animal kingdom within, creation. So when we look at living things on Earth,
Mm-hmm.
sex and sexuality and all that thing looks really different, species to species.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in such a huge way that in many ways, as human beings, because we are meaning makers, we tell ourselves what sex means. We tell ourselves what
Mm-hmm.
intimacy means, and that when it becomes normative, when it becomes a tool of oppression or power or shame,
Mm-hmm.
or even like spiritually being called evil, that it's all made up, and yet the damage that can be done is really serious.
Yeah. And I know that we need to wrap this up here pretty quick, but I want to say one more thing in that regard, regarding damage and regarding, our own spirituality. We get to a point where that what you're saying, cultural, religious, all of the context around it, that context, once again, is that sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
I belong here. That meaning maker, right?
Yeah.
So when you start to challenge that, even like if you 100% for the very first time feel compersion when your partner goes with somebody else, you're still going to have grief because you're going to be like, oh my God, what does that mean about me? This is what I had.
Yeah.
What does that mean about me? Does that mean I'm a bad wife?
Right.
Does it mean that, like, does it mean all of these other things? That, all of that is stuff you have to confront to be able to move past it.
Yeah.
And, then only then can you find the real joy in those feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And emotions, like joy, sadness, anger, these are all experiences that is the way our brains interpret data,
Mm-hmm.
that comes in and creates meaning out of it,
Mm-hmm.
and is informing me about an experience, and is trying to tell me whether it is good or whether it's a threat, right? Is this a benefit or is this a threat? And if I'm able to learn from that information, in my best self, rather than being consumed by the emotion, actually being with and understanding the emotion, being able to move along with it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And to me, that is a spiritual practice, to accompany my own emotional experience into becoming a better human being, a better lover, a better friend, a better partner. Yeah, and that's important.
Some of the most profound learning experiences we will have in this life are unlearnings.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah,
love that.
and
Can you say that again?
some of the most profound learning experiences that we have in this life are about unlearning.
Yeah.
There's lots more to say about this, but we do need to wrap up. So,
all right, for all of you who are listening to this and beginning to experience compersion for the first time, or if you've experienced it for a long time and are starting to be in a better relationship, better understanding of it, and even for those of you who do not feel it, and that's okay, it's a part of the human experience. And we know that because it exists for some people, that means that perhaps all people do have a capacity, but it's not a judgment to how much one feels or how little one feels. We're all just part of the journey together.
yeah. And, if you want to talk about it, get on our Instagram or our Facebook, because I'd love to hear how other people experience this.
Yeah. Share with us stories of compersion, or even stories of struggle. With compersion.
I'd love that.
And we do this together.
We'll build a community.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Justin.
Yeah.
Have yourself a wonderful weekend.
You do the same. I'll see you later.
Bye-bye.